So from all the highlights and stories and watching Derrick, it's just pretty obvious that they got an unusual athlete for a guy of that size to move around like he does. James, tell us a little bit more about Harmon and his career at Oregon.
Yeah, so his career at Oregon was just 1 year, 1 season, and really even shorter than that in a sense, because he was at this time of year for the NFL fans who aren't as dialed into college. Though I know I'm speaking in a part of the country who does have a awfully prominent Big Ten school in the not too distant geography, so it does help. This is the spring transfer window, and you still have players moving about who were one place in the spring, and then they'll be at a different place in the summer and play in the fall. Well, that was Harmon a year ago. He was still at Michigan State this time last year. So he didn't have the benefit of going through spring at Oregon. He didn't arrive until the summer. And he had gone through the portal in the winter, but he chose to stay at Michigan State. Then after, later on ended up going. All right. Well, point is he ended up having a career year here in his one season. And the only prep time he had in terms of learning a new defense, learning the language and all that. And by the way, competing for a job. Yes, he was a really productive player at Michigan State too, but putting himself in position to be the starting defensive tackle that they needed him to be. He needed to do all that in like 25 fall practices in August. And did that in a hurry. There really wasn't much room for interpretation. Did that very, very quickly. And this is in a room with a lot of really talented young players as well, all of whom are about to take over for him. So he did that fast. And like I say, then had an impact on a week-to-week basis. And then we go back and look at some of Oregon's biggest games, including the regular season game with Ohio State, one of the biggest plays of the game. He doesn't just force a fumble. I mean, he just outright rips it away from, I believe it was Henderson. It was either Henderson or Junkins. I'm getting mistaken now because it's back in October. But bottom line, he just flat out meets him in the backfield and just steals the football in what was a pivotal play at that point in the game. That's how gifted and talented, how strong. And yes, for a 6'5", 300-plus pound man, yes, of course. But no, I mean, he is a disruptor in the backfield. And that's where he had the career-high 10.5 tackles for loss and 5 sacks this past season and the PBUs. So he's not just a big guy who's ultimately just strong, but, it's mainly as a run stopper. Or, he's got those things, but he's got the speed, so he's only a pass rusher. No, he's also smart enough to get his hands up there. Very big, very, very big here in the defensive lineman, being gifted enough and athletic enough to bat balls down, too. And Derrick did that, and Jordan Birch did that, and other guys, too, as well. Yeah, it's like I say, he really is kind of the jack of all trades in terms of interior defensive lineman. Could play those multiple techniques and, like I say, can disrupt the game in any number of ways.
And also the first Oregon player ever selected in the first round by the Steelers. There were a couple of reports, at least one I saw, James, out there. I think it was Pelissero who put out there that there might be a medical red flag with Derrick Harmon regarding his shoulder. Harmon said he's fully healthy. Was this something that came up during the year, after the year? What do you know about that situation?
Yeah, I saw that as well. It wasn't something that came up during the year, at least not that we were aware of. He didn't miss any time here and really didn't have any issues in games that we were really aware of. So, again, there's always those minor dings and things that occur. But having said that, no. Now, I will say, go back to the Combine. He was part of the defensive line group. That's the tail end of that group. It wasn't just him, to be clear. But there was a pretty large swath of players from that group because it was so enormous. I think it was the biggest player group at the Combine, where they got held up collectively the most due to medicals. But he was not the only player in that group. I just note that because I had to spend the most time waiting because I had to wait for the presumptive first-round pick that was. But, I saw that report as well, but there was nothing that came up here that caused him to miss game time. But anything that came up subsequently, I couldn't speak to with authority. But like I say, it was nothing that ever came up here. And there are guys who, that even at this level where access is a little bit different by way of practice and the like, there are still guys in instances where you either see guys in slings or, walking boots or those sorts of things, but then they end up playing the next week. There are things that we do become aware of. We do see behind the scenes. Harmon was never a guy that we saw any issue with during his time here, like I say, but that was only for about 4 months also.
James Crepea from Oregon Live talking about Derrick Harmon. Now, one of the things Derrick said when he was introduced to Pittsburgh last night, James, was that it was a bittersweet moment for him because of his mom being in what I take to be a life-threatening situation. I think he said on life support, in fact, and that he was going to go and be able to tell her that he got drafted by the Steelers. He seems like a really a high character kid. Was this a storyline throughout the season? Were you aware of this? And then just what about he seems to have, great leadership traits.
Yeah. So, and so far as his mom's illness, I became aware last night, like the rest of you, that the severity of the current situation. But that if you saw the clip last night, I believe it was ESPN put out, where he talks about, this is my why, and I do it for family specifically, but especially for his mother. He had mentioned prior to the Rose Bowl that guys are going around asking all sorts of things to everybody. So one of the questions that somebody else was asking a bunch of players was, what was your best purchase with your NIL money? And what Derrick had said at the time, this is back in late December, was he had bought a wheelchair accessible van, to help his mother get around at the time. So yes, and you saw it again at the clip from ESPN last night, showing the health issues that she has had, not just recently and most recently, unfortunately, but obviously for many, many years. So that is something that has been obviously very, very personal, and yes, a huge motivating factor, far, far bigger than football for Derrick Harmon. So yes, happy for him, happy for his family that he has to have the moment and reach this ultimate dream in the football sense. But obviously really feeling for him and his family as well, for, like I say, for what he mentioned last night in terms of the severity of the situation presently for his mom. But when you talk about that on a personal level, and then in terms of, you asked about leadership and those sorts of things, again, he was here for 1 year, and he would be a guy who'd be quick to point out that he's not, I believe he said multiple times to us, he's not a big rah-rah guy. He's not necessarily a guy who's going to be leading in a huddle in a verbal way. But this is a guy who leads because you hear about things like lead by example. This is just kind of a tone setter player. I say, like, when you do the things that he does on the field, and then the way that he went about it, he was here for less than a year, guys. Like I say, like, you hear nothing about, nothing other than, stuff from teammates about just the way that he goes about his business. He was here for a reason. He was here to be a really effective player, but he was here to put himself in the position that he put himself in. Would he have been drafted had he gone, he either stayed at Michigan State or whatever? I can't predict the future, but ultimately he came to Oregon to win football games and be a really effective football player and put himself in a position to be a first-round pick. And lo and behold, he did it. Well, again, it doesn't just happen because he's a really big guy, really strong. Yeah, he had to put in the work. And in less than 1 year's time, for the teammates we had to develop relationships here, coaches he had to develop relationships here in a hurry, he showed it through work ethic, and he showed it for what he could do on the field. So again, like I say, he may not be the biggest pomp and circumstance verbal leader necessarily by his own admission, but the way that he goes about his business, that's how he does his talking.